We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Tuesday, and as you can tell, I'm in a different location, but you're probably not surprised by the location I'm in. I'm in Savannah, Georgia, in our little condo in South Savannah. We get down here a lot. We enjoy Savannah. We have a good time. Georgia's a beautiful place. Savannah, particularly, a beautiful place. So that's where we are until Thursday. And then we go back to Minnesota and things will look normal again. Fortunately, I have a setup where I can record the podcast here as well as at home. And finally, it's gotten to the point where it's at least comparable in terms of quality and that sort of thing. So anyway, we got a lot to talk about. We've got some emails to read and some interesting stories later on. But what we have to talk about, first of all, is the big news of yesterday. And that, of course, was the start of the Democratic National Convention. It was an exciting time in Chicago. The first day of the Democratic National Convention. There was a lot of hype surrounding it, a lot of excitement, and it did not fail us because it was a very exciting, motivational, inspirational, and even emotional first night with the Democratic National Convention. You really get a sense when you watch that first night that there's something other than a popular presidential candidate going on right now. I've said before, one of the most powerful things that anybody can have, regardless of what they're doing, is momentum. And Kamala Harris and Tim Walz certainly have an immense amount of momentum going on right now. And I think it largely has to do with the fact that over the last 8 years, we've been kind of in darkness. Even with Joe Biden as president, you had Donald Trump looming around, all the crazy shit, all the ridiculous shit he say and do. And people were just tired of it. They're tired of the chaos, they're tired of the negativity, and they're tired of having to worry every day. When Donald Trump decided he would run for president 2 years ago, people started worrying again. Joe Biden wins the presidency, Donald Trump is gone, then all of a sudden people feel some relief that that scourge, Donald Trump, is no longer around. But then he rears his ugly head again because he's trying to stay out of prison. And we have to deal with the shit, the chaos, the bullshit for the next 2 years. People are growing tired of it. Even Republicans are growing tired of it. So when we found out that Joe would step aside, Kamala would take over. It was a big surprise to everybody that people were really excited about her candidacy. And I think it's about her. I think she's important. I think she's smart. I think she's going to be a great president. There's no question. But it was really about the energy she brought. She's tough, but she's positive. And then she gets Tim Walz as her VP nominee, and he's tough, but positive. People have been starving for positivity, and we haven't seen much of it over the past 8 years. So when that opportunity is there, people get excited. They get behind it. Even Republicans are getting behind it. Judge J. Michael Ludig, who is a conservative judge who was appointed by George H.W. Bush. He's the go-to guy on TV news when it comes to serious constitutional or legal questions. He is the preeminent guy. And yesterday, he endorsed Kamala Harris, which goes against type. He's a conservative. And he said as much. He said, look, I don't agree with the policies that she has. I don't agree with the policies of the Democrats, but this is a bigger deal. This isn't about policies. This is about the very democracy in this country, the democratic United States. If we don't vote against what the Republicans are doing, the alleged conservatives, we might lose democracy. And somebody like Judge Ludig or some other Republicans, Adam Kinzinger, all kinds of folks that are with the Republican Party said, policies, we set them aside. Let's just save this country. And that's what I'm talking about with this particular convention. It's almost like it's a movement, you know? And a movement is a bigger thing than a popular candidate. If you're as old as I am, you've seen movements before. The anti-war movement during Vietnam, gay rights movement, the civil rights movement. These are bigger than individuals. And I think this movement is bigger than Kamala and Tim Walz, but they've been chosen to lead this movement. People have found confidence in that they are the ones that can do this. This is a movement that is about maintaining democracy and not falling into this dark hole, which is fascism or authoritarianism or whatever you want to call it. And that's what we saw during the Democratic National Convention. We saw a lot of jubilance. We saw a lot of joy, a lot of excitement, a lot of inspiration. And this is the thing that's going to carry us through to November. As I've said, this movement has momentum. And momentum is hard to stop. But then when you have somebody like Donald Trump and the Republicans constantly stepping on their own dicks because they don't know how to pull out of this fucking tailspin, it's almost a certainty. To me, it's almost destiny. The way it's going to go down is that we will continue down this path. Donald Trump cannot, will not pull himself out of it. He will continue to dig his hole. The destiny is that Donald Trump will be vanquished, the Republicans and the MAGA will be vanquished, and the Democrats will prevail. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will prevail. And then we're looking at a new era in this country. I know this sounds lofty. I know it sounds very positive, but that's kind of my stock in trade, you know? Somebody's got to look at this with a glass half full, and that's what I do. Because there's no value in me looking forward to terrible things or negativity. If we're going to start worrying about negativity, then what's the point of going on? That's one of the things that give me the biggest problem is when I get people constantly coming to TikTok or the podcast and saying, oh my, but this could happen or this could happen. We don't have time for you to worry about your negativity. We're on a roll here. You might as well ride that roll and hope to God that we continue and that we win. Good always prevails over evil. It might take some time, but it always wins. Just look at history. That's the way it's been. That's the way it will be. And that's what's going to happen in November. We're going to be looking at not only a win for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, but it's going to be a decisive win. Dare I say, it might even be a landslide. I know you're going to tell me, well, the polls. Well, Kamala is leading in the polls. But there's a lot of things the polls don't tell us. I mean, it's simply a snapshot or give us an idea how trends are going, and trends are going for Kamala Harris. So that's a positive thing. But there's a lot of things that polls don't tell us. As I've told you before, I think the biggest issue in this particular election, well, two things, is overturning Roe v. Wade. You just cannot take constitutional rights away from half of this country and anger 75% of this country. You can talk about Israel and Gaza and all that stuff, but for the young people in this country, this has got to be the most important issue. This is the thing that's going to have the direct impact on them for years to come. If this doesn't get them out and fight, well, they deserve what they get, but I don't think that's the case. I think the media likes to tell us certain things to keep this thing close because they're kind of like bookies trying to balance things to make sure that they get an audience. I don't see how it's possible that this is even close. And I hear people say that too. How can this be so close? Or people even on the Democratic side will say, it's going to be a close race. I don't see that. We're looking at the possibility of Florida turning blue, maybe Ohio, maybe Texas. If any one of those turn blue, it's fucking over. If Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan all go blue, it's over. There's nothing working in the benefit of the Republican Party, and everything they do is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, when this convention started on Monday, I knew, and I told you this before, that Donald Trump would try to do something to draw attention away from the national convention because he needs the attention on himself. He just definitely needs the attention. I'm thinking he might do something crazy or outrageous, which wouldn't be crazy or outrageous for Donald Trump. That would just be fucking Tuesday. But he and JD Vance are doing some campaign rallies in Pennsylvania, Arizona, and in Nevada. And they're going to hit these things hard, trying to draw attention away from the Democrats. But he can't do it. First of all, when he does give these campaign rallies, he always says some crazy shit and makes it worse for himself. Secondly, the momentum, the snowball going down the hill that is the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz train and the Democratic Party is unstoppable at this point. It truly is. That doesn't mean we don't need to continue to work and focus on shit, but it is virtually unstoppable. And I honestly believe that it's destiny. We've been in darkness long enough. We're going to have light at the end of the tunnel, light at the end of the day, because that's where we're headed. It's almost like a foregone conclusion to me. I don't know if you get the feelings I get, but I get feelings about things. I can tell how things are going to go. Is this going to be bad? Is this going to be good? And I usually go with my gut. Most people don't, but I do. I learned very young that if you go with your gut, you're going to be right more times than you're wrong. And my gut tells me this is not going to go well for Donald Trump. Beyond that, I know how narcissists end up too, as I've talked about that before. Narcissists always fly high for a time and then they get over the top of the curve and they start to slide quickly. And the thing about it is, as hard as they try, they're never able to pull out of it because they just don't have the tools to do it. Once that slide starts, it ends up in a crash. Donald Trump is in that slide. And when Donald Trump is done, there's going to be a lot of people standing there not knowing what the fuck to do. Their leader will be incapacitated, made out to be a pariah. He'll be exposed for all the things he does. And keep in mind this, once he fails in the election, that's just the beginning. Then these trials will come down and the convictions will mount, and he won't have the protection of being a candidate for president. He won't be president of the United States, and he will have pissed off a lot of people because he's lost yet another election for the Republican Party. So who wants to stand by him? Nobody fucking does, and nobody will. Donald Trump is in for a disastrous end. Guaranteed. It always happens to narcissists. They always end up that way. And Donald Trump is going to be one of the biggest crashes you've ever seen because he's one of the biggest buffoons and fools and enemies of this country we've ever seen. So I was excited about the day one of the national convention. My wife and I sat and watched it. We watched all the speakers. It was hard not to tear up from time to time. The emotions, the compassion and such that were shown were incredible. Joe Biden gave his swan song speech, and it was inspiring and compassionate, and it was sad in many ways. I mean, here's a guy that's been in the government for 52 years. And I learned something yesterday that I talked about in a TikTok, and I want to talk about it here because it kind of ties in with what I said about destiny. And it's about history. I really love history. And sometimes in history, you see some synchronicities, you know? You maybe not see them until the end, but they're there. Things happen and then other things happen like it later on. Like somebody says, we either learn from history or we are doomed to the future. Well, here's the deal. Joe Biden became the youngest U.S. Senator in 1972. 1972 was also the year a young woman, Shirley Chisholm, decided to run for the presidency in 72. She was a black woman, the first black woman ever to run for the presidency. Now, somebody said there was somebody before that. I don't know that, but that's not the point. Shirley Chisholm, 72, same year Joe Biden becomes a U.S. senator. She runs for the presidency. Of course, she doesn't win, but she's a very powerful woman. She was a very smart, articulate, intelligent woman. And she could have been a wonderful president, but the times didn't dictate that was even a possibility. So then years later, Donald Trump, Joe Biden becomes the vice president for the first black man to be president of the United States. I'm talking, of course, of Barack Obama. After that, later on, he becomes president of the United States, and he names the first black South Asian female to be vice president of the United States. He's part and parcel responsible for her becoming vice president of the United States. Now he's getting ready to end his career and he's ready to hand the presidency off to the same black woman, South Asian woman, to be the first woman, first black woman, first South Asian woman to be elected president. Think about that in those years, those ensuing years, 1972, 52 years later. Shirley Chisholm started this off. Joe Biden was weaving himself in and out of there all the time. He was part of the reason for the first black man to become president, the first black South Asian woman to be vice president, and now the first black South Asian woman to become president. It's interesting how this all ties in. And I will tell you this, I don't know Shirley Chisholm. She's long since passed. But I have a feeling she understood what she was starting. And if she were around today, she would be very proud of what's become of what she started. She'd be very proud and supportive of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Joe Biden was there all along the way. He's a compassionate man. He's an inclusive man. And he's wrapping things up for his career, and we should all be grateful for all that he's done for this country for these many years. So anyway, good start to the convention. We will be watching the convention as it continues. There's going to be some interesting things coming up, some stars, some excitement, some fun. So we're looking forward to that. All right. Now we do have some emails. If I can get it to come up. Okay, let's start it off. First one says, "Hey Boomer, I just wanted to drop you a note and let you know that Saturday's show with you and Ed was really good. Ed is pretty fucking smart, and I enjoyed the history lesson. So cool. My wife and I are headed up to the Minnesota State Fair next weekend. If I see you there, maybe we can share a bucket of cookies and milk together. Have a great weekend, Don from Illinois." Well, thank you, Don. I don't know if I'm going to the State Fair. My wife isn't a big State Fair fan, and I like going out there from time to time, but the crowds get crazy. And when you're older, things move very fast, and sometimes you get caught up in the rush and stuff. And I don't know. My wife and I will probably do something low key or go on an early morning or something like that. Next one says, Mike, hello. Do you know anything about the new pack called America Pack? Thank you, Charles. I do not know anything about America Pack. Be perfectly honest with you. But I have a feeling there are some people in the audience that know about it. So I would encourage you, if you know about America Pack and we can help Charles out here, send me an email, tell me what you know. Of course, I after the show, well, maybe tomorrow, I'll Google it to see what I can find out too, and we'll talk about it again here on the Rational Boomer podcast. Thank you for that question. I'll do what we can. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, Mike, why didn't you just Google it before the show? Because I don't read the emails before the show. I think partly because I'm lazy and partly because I want you to hear the emails when I hear the emails. And then we can go from there. We're a fucking team here. not running a show. I'm running a, what would you call it? A group. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. But anyway, thank you, Charles. We'll see what we can find out. All right, the next one. Hi, Mike J from California here. Thought I'd check in and say that I have time to meet next weekend and to share this thought. I've studied World War II and the rise of Hitler and the Third Reich, and now I can see only too well what Project 2025 would do. The fascist manifesto and everything the MAGA Nat Soch have planned uh, would be a precursor to an ethnic and cultural genocide worse than any other, with higher death toll and net loss to the world than the Holocaust. Won't happen, but still scary. Yes, that's true. And when you said we can meet next week, I'm not sure. I'm assuming you me being a guest on the show, which you're more than welcome to be. All you have to do is email me and tell me when you're ready, and we'll put it together as we always do. All right, next up. Um, Hi, Mike. What do you think the new administration will do with the fucking corrupt Supreme Court conservative justices? I finished listening to the recent episode with Ed, and I have to say, he is one of my favorite guests that you have on. Thank you for everything you do. Yeah, Ed Kress. P.S. I have a lot more questions. Yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah, Ed is a smart guy. He's an older guy. He's older than me, which is saying something. He knows a lot about history. And, as I've said before, the reason I have him on the show, he's the first person I ever talked to say, would you be on the show? And because we spent so much time on the radio together, I knew what I was getting into. I knew he was a smart guy. I knew he had some opinions, and I knew he was of a like mind. He's probably more liberal than I ever was. Um, so I thought it would be a good choice. And he and I worked together for a long time, so we can play off each other pretty well. Yeah, we're lucky to have Ed on when we have him. He's very interesting, and I will tell you, as I do on the show when he's on, be sure to check him out on TikTok and YouTube. He's at Holler Troll, HOLLERTROLL. And he is a great TikTok and a great YouTube, and it's not quite the same as what you hear on the podcast because it's not all strictly politics. With Ed, the only way I can explain Ed, and you have to be old to understand the reference, he's almost like Paul Harvey, a storyteller of sorts, about history, about pop culture, about politics. Yeah, I still got the cold, but it's getting better. So yeah, check out Ed and thank you. I agree with you. Ed does a great job on the show. Everybody does a great job on the show, frankly. Um, they just do it in different ways. All right, the next one says, hello, Mike. I've been wondering about something. Maybe you or one of your listeners may know. When, oh, I need to go back to that last email. You talked about the Supreme Court. Yeah, what will they do about the Supreme Court once Kamala wins? There's a few options. Um, a few of the options would be to try to impeach a couple of the, Alito and Clarence Thomas, try to impeach them. But first, they'd probably have to get rid of the filibuster, which they should do anyway. They could do that. Or they could work out a way to stack the Supreme Court. And maybe Joe could set that in motion before he leaves the presidency. That's a possibility. Put three or four more justices in the Supreme Court. That's a process too. I think I told Ed or somebody else on the show the most expeditious thing might be, and given that we'll have a prosecutor as president, she couldn't do it herself, but somebody like, oh, I don't know, maybe Jamie Raskin, who's a legal professor of law. What I would do personally, I would go to Clarence Thomas and say, look, Clarence, you're looking at possible indictments. You and your wife, tell you what, we'll cut you a deal. You retire right now and you can just go off and do whatever the fuck you want and do the same thing to Alito. That would get rid of two of them, and that would put us in a more even situation with the Supreme Court. I don't know what they'll do, but I can guarantee you something will be done because we have a problem. As long as we have a Supreme Court that's not credible, we have a problem. We have a lame democracy. We need all three branches to be in perfect working order in order to have a good democracy. And once Donald Trump's out of the way and MAGA's out of the way, we got to start fixing the shit they broke. And the Supreme Court is of the utmost importance. All right. Hopefully that gives you maybe not the answer, but something to think about. All right. The next one says, hello, Mike. I've been wondering about something. Maybe you or one of your listeners may know. When Trump and Kamala debate, if Trump even shows up, she can bring up his felony convictions and his upcoming trials. Can she talk about his alleged theft of top secret government documents? Can she talk about the fake elector conspiracy or the phone call to Georgia where he begged officials to commit election fraud? Can she bring up a failed attempt to block the peaceful transfer of power by force? What can she talk about with being accused of trying to influence the outcome of his upcoming trials, making it difficult to find an untainted jury? I'm sure that as a lawyer, she will know what's legal and what isn't. I'd purely love her to confront him like the prosecutor she is. Thanks for what you do. Scott in Redneck County, Pennsylvania. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we've talked about this with Joe Biden too, when he was coming up for the debate. What can he talk about? It's even tougher for a president of the United States. You don't want to give the appearance that you're influencing a trial that hasn't happened yet. So he has to be careful of that sort of thing. Or she has to be careful of that sort of thing. But Joe doesn't. Joe might be able to speak out between now. Well, he's been doing it. He did it on the in the convention. Um, what Kamala can talk about all the crazy shit he's done and said. There's no illegalities for her talking about anything. She could literally talk about anything. It's just a matter of she doesn't want to impact upcoming trials. Now, that said, the trial in the Manhattan District, we have a verdict. He was convicted. He'll likely be sentenced sometime after the debate. She can talk about that all she wants. That's already been adjudicated. That's already done. She can say whatever she wants about that. And literally she can say anything she wants. There is no laws about what she can talk about in a debate. It's just that what she wants to talk about without trying to impact future trials. She's going to be hard pressed to talk about those future trials specifically. I mean, I think she can talk about the fact that there was a search on his place, documents were found. I think she can say that. Um, but you're absolutely right. She's a prosecutor. She knows a lot more about this shit than I do. But the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump is going to say and do things, and she is going to have to push back. If he mentions some of these things, she certainly can answer that. Um, what she really needs to do is exactly what the woman at the Black journalist meeting or interview did. Get him riled up. Say something that makes him angry. Because once you make him angry, any thought process, and he doesn't have many, but any thought processes go by the wayside and he will be unhinged. No question about it. So hopefully she does that. And she doesn't have to acknowledge the documents case or the insurrection case. She can talk about what happened in the Manhattan District. And let's be honest, that is the most important thing here because we actually have 34 felony convictions. It's what we fucking got. So she can do what she wants with that regard. All right. The next one says, hi, Mike. Last week, Tim Walls asked if you could envision Trump working the McFlurry machines at McDonald's. Answer is, of course not, unless he was feeding off the spigot. I truly cannot see him doing anything most folks do: cutting the grass, making a campfire, paddling a canoe, operating a motor vehicle, petting a dog, being kind to others, the hard stuff. I remember seeing him at a relief center handing out a grocery bag of food to a hurricane victim. He couldn't even handle a grocery bag like a regular person. Instead of sentencing him to prison, Merchant or Marchands should assign him to 2 years of routine work picking up litter in the park or on the side of the road. Or maybe a civic groundskeeper so he can learn how to tend Ivana's grave. Such work would make a man out of him, or something kind of like that. Plus, we get the bonus of seeing the mighty fall. And he gets to show us all he knows about hard work. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I don't think Donald Trump's going to be doing any work. And you're right. He had the audacity to suggest that Tim Walz and Kamala Harris never had a real job, coming from a guy who's never had a real job. He started working for Dad. Dad bankrolled him. He lost it. Dad bankrolled him again. He lost it. And then Russia started bankrolling him. The audacity of him suggesting that these two, one was a teacher and one was a prosecutor, that they never had real jobs. That just shows you how fucking stupid he is. Absolutely fucking ignorant. All right. We are going to take a quick break and we will be right back. All right, we are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. We're moving through some emails. We'll talk about some other stuff. The next email comes from Charles. He says, Mike, hello. Why hasn't anyone questioned Trump's Chinese and Iran trademarks? Well, the thing is, with Donald Trump, there are so many things you can come after him for. It's hard to keep track of all of them. I mean, we've seen it ourselves. Once he gets in trouble for something, you get focused on that. Then something else happens and you forget entirely what was going on before. There's absolutely so much shit being thrown at Donald Trump. It's hard to keep track of all those things. I think once he loses this election, that's what his life is going to be. He's not going to get away with all the things he's done. I mean, let's be honest, he can only spend so much time in jail. He's 78 years old, and I don't think he'd last a month in jail. But there's a lot of things to go after him about. And people are afraid because he's a presidential candidate and all that shit. That's why he ran for the presidency. But when that's over, there's going to be a lot of people taking pot shots at that motherfucker. And there are going to be things that we didn't even know about that he's going to be held accountable for. I think ultimately there'll be just too much stuff piled on Donald Trump. They will get him locked up. They will crush him financially and reputationally, and then they'll probably just give up because why do you want to beat a dead horse or a fat 70-year-old fucking dictator? How many times can you beat him up? How long can you put him in jail? How much can you fine him? He's going to be crushed into virtually nothing. He's going to have nothing, no money, no power, no reputation, no job. When are we going to have enough of pounding his ass? First, personally, I'm a vengeful guy, so I'd love to see him pounded between now until the day he dies. And I hope he lives a long, fucking illustrious life. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff they should be looking at. Why is that lawsuit where he was a co-defendant with Jeffrey Epstein for raping a 13-year-old girl? Where's that? When's something going to be done about that? Who knows? There's just so much shit that's going on with Donald Trump. And I've always said this, look, man, we shouldn't worry about getting him on everything. Just get enough on him to be done with him. And then whatever happens to him later, good riddance. Hopefully he'll suffer. And I think he will. All right. Next one says, Hi, Mike. See, Trump is using AI Taylor Swift images, stating her fans are turning to him. One specific image portrays Taylor as Uncle Sam with the tagline, Taylor wants you to vote for Donald Trump. Trump's always squawking about his Trump brand. I pray that Taylor goes full bore with a cease and desist for infringing on her brand. Even better would be for her to pop up as a surprise guest at the DNC dressed as Uncle Sam and proclaim a vote for Harris Walls. Wishful thinking, but Taylor is a sharp person, and I'm sure she won't let Trump BS slide. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I saw that. I was going to talk about that later in the show, too, by the way. Um, Taylor Swift, as I've said before, I'm not a huge fan of her music. There are some songs I really like, but she's a young woman. She has an audience. I'm 64 years old. I'm not um, her audience. I would say this, I would be proud to have her if she was my daughter. She is a young woman of great success, of great talent, and great integrity. I told you the story before. I saw um, her documentary. My wife and I watched it, and she was at the time talking out about speaking out against Marsha Blackburn, who is a senator or rep. You've heard Ed talk about her in Tennessee, where Taylor Swift lives or lived anyway. And she was going to speak out against this woman because of her stance on reproductive rights. And her dad and some of her managers says, no, don't do that. Don't do that. That's not good. And she said, listen, I don't care if it's not good for me. I need to speak out. I need to say something about this, and I'm going to do it. And she did. Now, in 2020, she did endorse Joe Biden. But since that time, she's even got bigger than she was in 2020. This woman is clearly probably the most successful entertainer in this country. She has more money than anybody. She has more success than anybody. And Donald Trump, when you get to be Donald Trump and you get to be in that mindset, you do something a psychologist friend of mine told me once was self-defeating behavior. Now, the word is that he's very desperately focused on Taylor Swift. I think he understands that if she speaks out, that it's going to be a problem because she has a lot of ears in the millennial and Gen Z demographics. So he's been freaking out about this. He apparently talks about Taylor Swift all the time. He's just been sitting and waiting. And sometimes people like him are so afraid of something, will try to make it happen just so they can stop suffering with the anticipation of it. They don't even do it consciously, but that's what they do subconsciously. And I think that's what he did here. Now, he didn't make up the AI of Taylor Swift like Uncle Sam saying, I want you to vote for Donald Trump. But Donald Trump did retruth it. So his name is attached to it. Now, people will say, well, Taylor Swift will sue him, send him a cease and desist letter, which she probably will. She could probably sue him back into the Stone Age because she actually does have money, a lot of money, and a lot of power. But what I think this actually may have done, and I can't speak for Taylor Swift, I don't know Taylor Swift from anybody. I do have a lot of respect for her. But if she was at that point where she just didn't want to get involved in politics this time around, you could understand that. But what Donald Trump did here is he almost sucked her into the argument. He put a situation on the table that's kind of forcing her hand to say something, which is his greatest fear at this point. She stands up for Kamala Harris. She has she was fighting for reproductive rights when she was going against Marsha Blackburn. And we know how abortion rights or reproductive rights are the main thing on the table right now. For Donald Trump to do this has got to annoy somebody like Taylor Swift, somebody trying to taint her brand. Now, I would say this, if her dad or some of her managers says, "Oh no, you can't do that." Are you really going to tell Taylor Swift she doesn't know what she's doing? Nobody's more successful. Nobody draws bigger crowds. Nobody makes more money. Nobody does the right thing like Taylor Swift. If this got to her and she's angry, I'm thinking she's going to get sucked into this somehow. And that would be the death knell to Donald Trump. He's already losing when it comes to millennials and Gen Z. This would just put the last nail in the coffin. I'm hoping we do see Taylor Swift come out and at least say something. If she showed up at the convention, well, that would be fucking crazy. But Donald Trump needs to be stopped. He can't co-opt people that don't like him and say they do. And because Taylor Swift is big on what's right and what's wrong, she's going to be hard pressed to just send him a cease and desist letter and forget about it. And I don't know her, but I know the type of person she is. She's very specific about things and she has integrity. And that is going to be quite a quite a slight to her. And she doesn't have to put up with it. So we're hoping against hope that she comes out and just says, I vote for Kamala. It wouldn't be a surprise in the least, but we'll see what happens. All right, the next one says, well, I always said I wondered what it would be like to have a woman president. It's happening, and this is going to be so cool and interesting. Okay, now that we know it's going to happen, do have one question. Who will be certifying the election since the VP is running and will win? This should be interesting. Thanks, Boomerang. And Boomerang. It's autocorrect. Gene, SA, Texas. Um, it would be, it should be her actually, because she will be vice president at the time of the certification. She would probably do it. Now, if it's not her, it would be the Senate pro tempore. I'm not sure who that would be. That would be the oldest person or the longest tenured Democratic senator. Who would that be? I'm trying to think. It wouldn't be Schumer. Well, whatever it is, it's going to be Kamala Harris or a Democrat from the Senate. That's what's going to happen. And that's why I'm not as worried about what happened in 2021 happening in 2024, 25. All right. Hi, Mike. Apparently, the U.S. Softwood Lumber Association thinks they might soon lose friends in D.C. who are pro duty on product inbound from other countries. Yes, even from your neighbors to the north who have your back and likely don't benefit from cost breaks nearly as much as some protective U.S. senators would like us to believe. Not long after Kamala's rise to popularity and tides quickly changing for Donnie, the aforementioned softwood lumber lobby worked like hell to get duties jacked up now and before the election. Sure, Joe would have to have signed off, but he won't need to worry. And besides, this might be all part of a strategy. Can you imagine how big an effing hero he would be to the Canadians if before passing the torch, he reduced the duty increase to something reasonable or even canceled it entirely? Joe's a shrewd politician, unlike someone else we know, and I wouldn't be surprised in the least to see him do that. Possibly among other positively viewed things that will cement his legacy. Cheers, Ray in Canada. Yeah, 40 million people and not a single Buca de Beppo. I'm assuming he's talking about Canada. Well, that's a story I'm not familiar with. I know we went through a period of time when lumber was outrageously high. That has come down now. I think Joe Biden's got a great opportunity between now, the election, and a bigger opportunity after the election to January 20th. I think Ed talked about it the other day, and he said Joe can do a lot of things after the election not affecting the election, and January 20th, because anything he would do wouldn't necessarily stick to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris would do whatever she does after January 20th. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if there are a bunch of things that Joe Biden does on the way out. As far as cementing his legacy, I think his legacy is cemented now. He's probably done more as a president than any other president, certainly in my lifetime, maybe in the history of this country. He's done a lot of amazing things with a lot of pushback. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he did something like that. That whole story's new to me. It's not in my realm, so I appreciate you bringing it to light. I hope Joe does a lot of things to rectify some things to get Kamala on the road running when she takes over on January 20th. All right. This next one says, Hey, Boomer, loving all the recent podcasts and guests like Eric from Iowa today. Could you please send me his TikTok and YouTube handle? I'm having trouble finding him. Must be spelling. Analytical Iowan. Wrong. Thanks, Tim. Well, Eric's handle on TikTok and YouTube is Analytical Iowan. I see the way you wrote it out. This may be the problem. You wrote it out as two words, analytical space Iowan. What you need to do is go into TikTok and write at the at sign, analytical Iowan, all together. ANALYTICAL IOWAN. Put it all together at Analytical Iowan. You will find him there and on YouTube. So, and I sent him that via email too. So for any of you having problems, that may be the problem that you're looking at there. All right. And speaking of Eric, I have an email from Eric. He says, Hi, Mike. I love being back on the podcast. It's always a great time. I read an opinion piece talking about how the Democrats might try to force VP Kamala Harris to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Joe Biden. The reason this Trump-la-fuck gave was because Trump is going to win, and the Democrats are pissed that Joe Biden basically appointed Kamala Harris to be the Democratic candidate. The Trump-la-fuck said that some Democrats wanted a brokered and contested convention with the nominee getting sorted out at the convention. I'm particularly surprised that the Democrats didn't go that route, and I'm glad they backed Kamala Harris almost immediately. I've been listening to a lot of Alan Lichtman lately and his 13 keys to the White House. Uh, Two of his keys are the White House nominee, the incumbent, and there are a clear winner going into the convention. Alan Lichtman says no one has won the presidency when their party controls the White House going into the election. The nominee is not the incumbent president, being the VP doesn't count for a system, and if their party doesn't have a clear winner going into the convention. The Democrats could have potentially blown everything by pushing the idea of a party contest at the convention. While I find his keys interesting and they do give me hope, but that doesn't mean I'm going to take it easy going into the election. No, you shouldn't. Did you see Trump's speech in Pennsylvania? At points, his talking points were met with silence. The appeal of Trump is gone, and I'm even more confident of a landslide. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I've seen Alan Lichtman, and I have a lot of respect for him, and he has a lot of success. So I buy into what he's saying, and he's as much as said is that if Kamala did not win the presidency, have to be a lot to happen, a lot of bad things to happen. He seems pretty confident that Kamala will win, and since he's been successful in predicting all these elections since the 80s, the only election he didn't predict correctly was 2000 when George W. Bush beat um, what's his name? Al Gore. The funny thing about that is that was the election that was decided by the Supreme Court, and some people question whether or not it was legitimate. But I have seen bits and pieces of all of Donald Trump's speeches, only because I enjoy watching him sink. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's sinking. The people around him tell him that he needs to focus on policy and strategies. Common sense would tell you that that's what you do. Donald Trump's not capable of that. Donald Trump will start trying to do what he's told, and then he gets bored. He doesn't get the reactions because, when he starts spewing data, he's just throwing things out here and there and everywhere. It makes no sense. And that's why he gets this silence all the time. He really needs these people to be screaming, yelling, laughing, cheering, and doing all those things. So he will always revert back to his instinct, calling names, saying negative things. And for some Trumplefucks, they will react as such. But he can't help himself. Like I've said before, he's a guy stepping on his dick every time he turns around. Um, I too, Eric, think that there's going to be a landslide, or at the very least, a decisive win. I mean, like there's no question. And I think a decisive win and a landslide is kind of important. Everybody worries about them trying to claim rigged election. The bigger the split, the bigger the difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, the less opportunity they have to complain about it. I mean, you can't say the system was rigged, the election was rigged if you lost by a fucking landslide. And I think there's some closure by getting a landslide too. People have worried for the last 2 years while Donald Trump's been president. I get them every day. I'm worried he's going to get elected. I say, don't worry, he's not going to get elected. But they still worry. People even say to me, do you think you'll run again? That motherfucker won't live to 2028. I guarantee you. He's not a healthy man, and with everything crushing down on him, he can't continue to take it. He looks questionable now. Um, but I think this country, in as much as they need Kamala and Tim Walz to win, it would go a long way for the recovery or the rehabilitation or the healing of this country for it to be decisive. And not just decisive against Donald Trump. As somebody pointed out in the convention last night, it's not enough to just to beat Donald Trump. We have to eradicate the Republicans in Congress too. Those people that stood with Donald Trump, they need to go too. So this needs to be a huge blue wave, tsunami, if you will. And we need to not only clear out Donald Trump decisively, we need to clear out some of these MAGA fucks that have been causing the problems. Because even if Donald Trump is gone, these people are like a cancer and they will spread again, and it's something we'll have to deal with again. So when it comes to the Republicans or MAGA specifically, we got to put them down and put them down to stay down. It's absolutely crucial that we do that. And I think we will. I think, as I've said before, destiny is such that um, it's a foregone conclusion. It's going to happen. I just feel it. And like I say, I go with my gut feelings and I'm almost always right. So we'll see. But I think we're in a good spot. I think we're in the middle of a movement. I think the momentum is going the right way. And we're looking at what, 77 days for it to culminate with the election on November 5th. They're going to keep this thing rolling. After this convention, Kamala Harris will pick up support. People will jump on board. And eventually, here it's going to come to the point where Donald Trump is truly losing his shit because he'll realize that there's no way out of this tailspin. All right, somebody brought this up earlier. Just want to talk about it quickly again. Taylor Swift has yet to endorse any presidential candidate this election. But again, former President Donald Trump says he accepts the superstar's non-existent endorsement. See, Donald Trump thinks he can fool people. He thinks he's a master orator. He thinks he can tell you that in spite of what you see and hear, all you have to do is listen to what I say. Well, that's well and good for some dumb fucks in this country, but I have a feeling Taylor Swift might have a different take on this. One of the AI manipulated photos depicts Swift as Uncle Sam with the text, Taylor wants you to vote Donald Trump. The other photo depicts fans of Swift wearing Swifties for Trump t-shirts. Now, I didn't know there was that second one there. So this has got to piss her off a little bit. First of all, stealing her fucking brand. He's all about brands, but he's jumping all over her brand. One of the posts that was shared by Trump is satire. A slew of fake AI generated photos of Swifties for Trump references the thwarted planned terrorist attack at Swift's Vienna concerts earlier this month with a caption that says, Swifties turning to Trump after ISIS foiled Taylor Swift concert. See, this is the thing. They just make up shit. Um, Kamala Harris is going to enact the 25th Amendment against Joe Biden because he's mad about. They say shit and it's based on no facts, no truth. They just say shit in hopes people will believe it. Now, there are some people that will believe it, but not enough to make a fucking difference because they are simply um, they are simply the base who are fools, and it's ridiculous. Now, after publications of an article, an editor from a website called Wisconsin Right Now reached out to CNN to say she took two of the photos Trump posted at his rally in Racine, Wisconsin in June. Jessica McBride said the woman in the two of the photos, the only two photos that weren't generated by AI, is named Jenna Piwowarchik. I know so many Swifties who have conservative values and many, many more have reached out to express their support and appreciation for Swifties for Trump. The woman said in a statement provided by Wisconsin News Now, by focusing more on the AI photos than other real persons in the photos that Trump shared, um, I think media are missing an opportunity to recognize that all of the millions of Taylor Swift fans, of course, there will be many who support Trump and conservative values and also love her music. We exist. We are real. Yeah. You can be a Swift fan, a Taylor Swift fan, and you can support Donald Trump, but you don't speak for fucking Taylor Swift. And I guarantee you, I don't know anything, and I can guarantee you there's no way Taylor Swift supports Donald Trump. So maybe you'll get mad at her when she comes out and says something other than what you're suggesting. All right. So Taylor Swift, it'll be interesting to see what she says. And I have a feeling she's going to say something. If I was in her position and somebody tried to steal my brand and hijacked what I believe, I'd be fucking talking. Well, here's some good news for Donald Trump. Remember that big story about how Donald Trump's media company was going public in the IP and he's going to make billions of dollars? Haven't heard much about it lately, but things haven't been going good. Shares of Trump media stock DJT are facing serious risks this week, according to a report from Forbes. The publication noted that Trump media management failed to hold an earnings call, likely at the request of the majority shareholder and former Donald Trump. Without an earnings call, investors did not receive information about future plans and expectations of how things could improve for Truth Social. While CEO Devin Nunes must look out for all shareholders, he's legally allowed to focus on interest of Trump, who owns well over 50% of the shares. This may explain why Nunes chose not to hold an earnings call. Forbes noted that the minority shareholders do not have a strong investment reason to hold on to the unstable stock, which was often received as payment for services, as repayment of cash loans, or as low cost or free positions from digital world. Acquisition or origination and merger activities. Much of the stock will be able to be sold as early as September. Now, most of Trump's shares are locked up, preventing him from selling. However, the board could grant him an exemption, allowing him to sell some of his shares while maintaining a controlling interest in the company. Therefore, selling now would allow him to capture current prices and raise cash prior to the expected September selling by others. The report also cited erosion in the Trump brand as a risk for investors. Yeah, who wants to invest in Donald Trump? He's a fucking loser. Now, Trump media is now down 70% in less than 6 months from the March 25th merger, indicating all is not well with the company. Second, Donald Trump has been absent from the company as he makes his run for the presidency, raising the question of when, if he will return, the report pointed out. And the fact of the matter is he's not coming back. I think there's a lot of people that hold stock in Donald Trump's thing that just like it because it's Donald Trump. I guess they don't care if they lose money. But Donald Trump's DJT, the media company, is going to end up just like its owner, Donald Trump. It'll crash, it'll burn, and it will fade away into obscurity. There is nothing that's going to help this company. I'm sure Donald Trump thinks if he wins the presidency that he'll be able to bring it back and make all kinds of money. But the fact of the matter is he's not going to win. He's just not going to win. All right, the last thing I wanted to mention was Fox News dropped out of Donald Trump's lengthy speech on the economy on Monday as the GOP presidential nominee looks to turn the tide on Vice President Kamala Harris, who continues to rise in the polls. The panel discussion following some of Trump's remarks is certainly not what Trump would like to hear on Fox News. And he's made a regular habit of attacking one of the panelists, former Bush aide and campaign strategist Karl Rove. And the quote is, okay, that's the president in York, Pennsylvania, keeping an eye on that speech on the economy. Britt Hume, Karl Rove, and Maria Harf are all here. Karl, let me start with you. This is obviously an effort which the other party always does as sort of a counter programming during the week of the opposition's party's convention. We're going to hear from the former president every day this week. He's there in New York talking about the economy. What do you think about the message there? Asked anchor Martha McCallum. Rove said, well, smart to go to a critical state, offering a kind word for the rest of his analysis. After an exasperated sigh, Rove added, a much more disciplined message is needed. I mean, I've been through this twice, and you want to go to these places and you want to have simple messages that the media has to cover. Rove, the last GOP presidential campaign manager to win the popular vote, added that and then they've got no option except to report to the people of Pennsylvania or the people of Arizona, whatever it is you want to have. You give them something big and outlandish and claims about this or that, and they're going to pick the dominant media is going to pick out something nationwide that's not going to be helpful to them. The local media may or may not get it right. And the point of this is that Donald Trump gets an opportunity. He's going to be talking to the public. He's going to be giving campaign rallies every day this week because of the convention, and he's going to waste those opportunities because he can absolutely not help himself. He's going to waste them by going off on tangents and ranting and raving and doing all the things that he does, and it will all work against him. As I've said before, Donald Trump cannot help himself. He cannot help himself in this situation. He doesn't have the capability of coming back from this. So, as I've always said, let Donald Trump talk. Let him do what he's going to do. Let him piss off Taylor Swift. Let him scare the women of this country with Roe v. Wade and the draconian things that they are calling for. When it comes down to the election in November, we have a great candidate in Kamala Harris. and she can win just based on that. But coupled with Donald Trump being the absolute worst candidate in the history of presidential elections, is just going to add to that. And that's why I say there's going to be a decisive win. You know, when Joe Biden was running against Donald Trump, I always thought Joe Biden would win. I still think Joe Biden would win. I thought it might be tight, but more people hate Donald Trump and are scared of Donald Trump, and people supported Joe Biden. But it wasn't a matter of who was more popular, Joe or Donald Trump. It was the fear that Donald Trump instilled in people and the possible destruction of this country and certainly democracy. We still have that issue for Donald Trump. He still has that problem going into this election. But now we have a candidate who's also extremely popular, maybe at an unprecedented amount of popularity. We've never seen this for a candidate before. So you couple those two things together, the only thing it can spell is a decisive or a landslide win. That's what it tells us. That's what logic tells us. But we'll have to wait and see for November 5th to see if it actually plays out that way. All right. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.